This is something they address. Let's for a moment before we get there. No, it's Nageya because we will need to what is the Isab of Asachas?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Rashi says here, yeah. Migi the Taisef Ana ala Chelav Mishum Kachim, Taisef Anami Isa Achila Mishum Zarus. Alpagav the Aser v'Koi B'Achila Ave Le Noisa Migi the Taisef Isa LeMizbeach Mishum Noiser Taisef Nami LeKoi Mishum Noiser. Anach Trei Mishum Isa Moisef Nitma She'ad Achshav Hoya Muta B'Chatichas Basa Kodesh V'Achshav Nesa B'Hem Migi the Mitzer B'Shar Chatichas Mishum Tuma Nesa Nami B'Zu Mishum Tuma B'Inesa Koil. Yeah. So Rashi is saying essentially this nakuda that it doesn't have to be, even though in this particular piece, there is no additional zaras. There is no additional issa to the kain because it never was mutter to the kain in this particular piece because we talk about chaylev. But because it would be chal on the rest of the parts, it's chal on this as well. Huh?
Or because there's an additional
or because there's a right. Whatever the isser is, if it took effect on some other parts. But really, we have a problem if the only part that was noisar, meaning the only part that was left overnight, was the chaylev till the morning. So then there is no other parts that it affected. Let's say that all the Imurim went on the Mizbeach, all the parts were eaten properly. The only part that was nicer was chaylev, then there's no additional.
Isser Kol has to actually be chal something else, or just has to be able to be chal something else? I mean, let's say with like the step that we had originally of like sisters, right? There are other sisters who would also become an Afrosishas, and then as an Isser Kol, right, then this woman would also become an Afrosishas. So if there happens to be no other sisters, then there would be no Isser Kol?
No. See, that's very different. His question is in the Mishnah's case. In the Mishnah's case, it was that there was one sister, and when the other sister got married to the other brother, now there was the isser of a wife's sister applies to all the other siblings, other sisters. It applies to this one as well. So he's asked, well, what happens if there is no other sister? But there, it is for sure an isser that applies to other things. Now, there may or may not be other sisters, but the isser of a sibling applies to everything. Over here by chaylev, there is nothing else. There is no maisa of noisar that aser zaras, because it was already aser bezaras.
So which zaras, which isser is which chatos is bezaras? What are the chatos are?
Itoisa by nami isachila mishum zaras.
No, I know, but in the original, in the arba chatos, what are the arba chatos? For kachim tumsako, for
kachim and tuma,
for chaylev and for yom kippur.
Right.
There's no chatos for zaras. Let's say there's no zaras. Let's say it's a kite. Because Rashi said, anyways, it's a murim.
No, the question is, why does Noiser take effect?
Noiser takes effect, Rashi says. Noiser has nothing to do with the country. Noiser takes effect because it's also in his day.
Mashman Rashi, one of the chatos.
Noiser Rashi says takes effect because it's also in his day.
But the Gemara said because of Zaras.
So Rashi, what do you need? Let's say there was no zar. Let's say it's a kite.
But it's everybody's Zar legabi Murim.
Right? But there's no chatos for zaras.
No, for Noiser there is. Everybody's a Zal.
Why is there no
let's say
why is there no chatos on zaras?
There isn't.
The fall zar that eats hektish. What happens?
No.
No. The Chayash Rashi that Me'ila is before it's brought. But once it's actually once it's brought, then there's a chatos on zar.
Everybody is the Me'ila for Kache Mizbeach, for the Oila Mizbeach. Because it's never hutar.
When the eel is before it's makir. Once it's makir, then then there's ours. Then you would be chatas. Right?
Yeah, it is. This Rashi is addressing the confusion here, where the Gemara is listing something different.
But is it giving the chatas for Eichel Kachim without it?
Yes.
That's what Rashi says. The Gemara creases.
Then even if it wasn't nice, it'd be kind of four. What's the four? Then you should have five. Then
So,
you should have five.
so he's called that. That's the thing. Then he's
Can you count five?
Yeah.
What are your five?
If it's Chayla,
Okay.
Kachim without it,
Okay.
right? What's it called?
No, sir. Can you tell me?
Nice, sir. From William Kippur.
That's why there's four petals in an ocean.
But that means there's no chatas for the Zaris, but only an Ashim.
There's only an ocean for the zones?
that's for the Me'ilah. As he
So
said.
for Zaris, you don't get chatas. You don't get chatas. For Eichel Kachim the Zaris, you don't bring the chatas.
And that's the Me'ilah
There's no chatas for Zaris.
for Zaras. Yeah, but the Aser v'Koy B'Achila Havali Noiser Migudi Toisav Lisem is Beach Mishum Noiser. So there's a new Isser for the Noiser that even the Mizbeach it can't go. So nobody that's totally Aser. So that's the Isser Moisef.
But there's no chatas.
On what? On
the
Zar?
Zaris Eichel Kachim.
So it's an ocean?
Zar is not
It's
going to
just
get.
an
It's
Okay.
just the Asher. That's just an Asher. The where's the Bavasachas?
Yom Kippur and Shabbos.
So you have Yom Kippur and Shabbos. The Rishonim say there's another Bavasachas that could be where you can have the Chalev and the Kachim come at once. If it's a Bachar. Bachar is Kachim,
No.
and the Chalev and the Bachar, the firstborn animal, becomes Kachim automatically at birth, and the Issa Chalev comes at birth.
Caleb comes when born.
Because beforehand it's just you see by Ben Pekua, right? Yeah.
And but before it was covered from that, he was born.
At that moment, that it's
It should be first.
that would be a Bavasachas. Okay. Let's move on to
Caleb is also even when it's a chai. That will come.
Chalev is.
Also even when the animal.
You can take a bite out of an animal off the line.
Even though
You eat it, it's a chayla.
Chalev is also right from birth. Correct. Because it's the Chalev is it's Chalev. It's Chalev all the time.
What's it adding to even the chai? Maybe it's only the chal when the animal is mishkan.
When it's Avim Menachai. Avim Menachai. The Issa Avim Menachai. The Issa Avim Menachai only is applicable when it's alive. That would come at the same time.
No, but I'm saying when the animal is you're saying because it's in a vasach.
It's Bavasachas. Yeah, Chalev is Chal because it happened at a time. There was nothing that came beforehand.
So it's a vasach. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's stronger than Avim Menachai too. There's no chorus. This is Avim. Chalev has chorus. Huh? On what? Avim Menachai has Avim Menachai is a lesser Isser because it's not an Issa Olam. It's not an Issa Olam. Okay. It's confusing. There are many cases. One thing that the Gemara, the Brisa brings, the Shita Rami Meir. Rami Meir Oimer im Hoysa Shabbos v'hitzia bepiv chayiv. Now, if it was Shabbos and he did Hotzah carrying, and from here Rashi points out that there is no Isser Hotzah on Yom Kippur, so therefore there's going to be an Isser b'Vasachas of Shabbos and Yom Kippur. Now, the Ketzais asks a question here, which really others asked beforehand, and there's an important thing that comes up in Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that he has an issur of carrying. The issur carrying is going to be a Shabbos issur, which is b'misa. If it's b'misa, there's a kamle b'derabba minei. The Torah, the halacha is, the Torah says, Risha achas atamachayva, you can only, basin can only hold somebody responsible or really give somebody an einish on a single punishment, the greatest one. So capital punishment, if there's a chiyuv misa here for Shabbos, so that would exempt any money. And by Asha Me'ila, on the Asha Me'ila, you're only chayiv carbon if you also have to pay back the monetary obligation to the carbon. So when somebody eats a kachik that he's not allowed to eat, he has a chiyuv of asham, a carbon, Asha Me'ilas, for having misused the kachik, and he's mechuyev to pay 125%, the keren and the chaimish, which is a halachic 25%, halachic fifth, which is 25%, which equals a total of a fifth of the total 125%. 25 is a fifth, so he has to pay that back. And since there's a kamle b'derabba minei, he should be exempt. If he's exempt, because Beis Din can't make him pay the money. If Beis Din can't make him pay the money, he should be exempt of the carbon. So according to Rabbi Meir, that added that there's an issur Shabbos, actually that takes away, that does give you a fifth chatas, but it takes away the yasham. Understand the question?
Are we talking about carbon in Shabbos? Why are we talking about figure meat? Is these all the Shabbos?
So this we saw earlier and comes up a lot, that this that we say that kamle b'derabba minei is a patur, or on the money, is not only if you actually did it b'mezid and based in and with witnesses and there's edim and asra, and so therefore you're going to actually get misa, but even if you're not going to get misa, that means you did it b'shaygeg, or there are no edim, or there's no hasra, you're going to be exempt. You're going to be pater afilu b'shaygeg. So if that's the case, over here, that should pater you. So the question is, how do we understand kamle b'derabba minei? Is the psul, is the ptur of kamle b'derabba minei mean your only action that's attributed to you is the most severe one, and the rest of them are just not attributed to you? It's not considered your maisa, and therefore you're when we say kamle b'derabba minei and you don't, Beis Din doesn't give you another malchus, you didn't do the lav, you didn't do another lav, you only did one issur. Or if Beis Din says you don't have to pay, that's not your action. The action, so a classic case of kamle b'derabba minei is somebody stabbed someone to death, and in doing so tore their garment, their clothing, so they also damaged. So the way to understand this is kamle b'derabba minei says you didn't tear someone's shirt. That's not what you did. You killed someone. The rest of it is not a maisa attributed to you. You killed someone. Did you also damage a shirt? No, that's an insignificant act in the totality of what we're looking at. Beis Din's only gonna look at the one action, and the rest doesn't count. If we say that that's the pshat in kamle b'derabba minei, that means, if we say that that's the meaning of kamle b'derabba minei, that means that actually over here he didn't do the other actions. So he doesn't have a chatas here. He doesn't owe the me'ila, because the Shabbos tells you the Asha Me'ila. Yeah, he doesn't owe the Asha Me'ila. So it would be total exemption.
Would it be simpler just to say that we did those other actions, but it's gonna be pater the onish?
So why? Yes.
It seems to fit with the actual physical events in the example you gave.
no doubt that he also did other things, but they're not going to be mishtayach to him in some way.
Like if the person who was stabbed and killed has an heir, and they were wearing their priceless $1 million jacket, and that heir might want to come after the killer for that money. They very much suffered that loss in reality. It was a real thing that was lost.
For sure, even more so, because Kollel b'Rabbi Minei doesn't only pater you necessarily from the same person. It could be misa le'echad v'momin la'acher. That means if in doing the murder, he shot through someone else's car, and the damage was somebody else's, still going to be exempt. So to show how far this could go and how strong your question is, like, why do we have to say that there's no action?
It doesn't seem like there's like there's no like, it doesn't seem like there's any reason why you can't attribute two things for one person's action. Meaning, if it would be mammon and mammon, there's no problem in the chayv mammon, right? He shoots through a car and damages someone's mammon, right? Then we would say chayv for both, right? But there's no limitations to how many things we can attribute to your one action. It sounds like there's a specific restriction when it's misa and like two different orders of
Kollel b'Rabbi Minei doesn't necessarily have to be misa. It could be just anything more severe.
I'm saying the point is that misa and mammon or knat or malchus, it has to be a different nature of a punishment or something. I mean, within the same, as I was just saying, there's no reason why mammon and mammon. We
Agreed.
Both, right? Like,
Agreed.
So it's not mistaber to say that just only give you one of the things, because why wouldn't that apply to every form?
Yeah, the Tzais Achoshin also doesn't like this, and he takes it differently. But his main thing is based on really trying to assess, and he wants to show from very.
What's the two steps? One is that it's not his nice, the other is
That it's a patur in the moment.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
kind of the.
But he takes it one step further than that, and he says it's not actually a patur in the moment. He wants to show that it's not a patur in the moment, and he wants to. He shows from our Gemara and from other places that there actually is not a patur moment at all. You actually chayiv for the moment that you gave. Basin's just not going to. Basin's not going to do anything about it. Basin's not going to get involved in the double jeopardy kind of thing. We were already giving you the more severe punishment. We're not going to get involved in the lesser punishment. But that doesn't mean that there's no chiyuv. He brings this from a Rashi. Rashi seems to clearly say, at least indicate that, because of the question of an esnan. An esnan is when somebody makes a promise to a zonah, to a harlot, and says, here's what I'm giving you for it. And the Gemara says, esnan asotira afilu imay. Even if that harlot would actually be a misa, if it was his mother, and he made her a promise, he gave her an animal that would count as an esnan. So Rashi says, "V'nasal b'esnan tle esnanhu v'asal karban." It's going to be prohibited as a carbon because this is a gift to a harlot. Now he said, wait, but if the mother came to Basin and said, this is what my son did, and he owes me an esnan and he doesn't want to pay, Basin would say, we're not, that's not a claim, because actually what you did is a misas Basin, right?
Normally a regular zonah, not his mother, would be able to claim the money.
There's a claim of an esnan. Yeah,
Yeah,
you made me.
That payment is owed.
The payment is owed. The payment is owed, and you owe me the money, and you made a promise, and you didn't pay. So since she came to Basin would say, "Kollel b'Rabbi Minei." Therefore, Rashi says it shouldn't count as a gift for the zinus, because it actually you can't claim it in Basin. Nevertheless, when he does give it, it counts as a gift for the harlotry. Afba makamisa nami rami alma afba makamisa rami tashlumin aleki avnilu. So Rashi clearly says that when that shows us that when there's an obligation, when there's a Kollel b'Ramim, nevertheless there's an obligation to pay it, and so therefore when he does pay up, it's a gift for the znus, and so therefore it's not going to be kosher as a korban. It can't be a korban because it is actually an esnan, a gift to the harlot. So he says, so there we see.
It should be because it should be Kollel b'Ramim because he's not actually chayiv for the Moshe. Even though he's not chayiv from the time he made the agreement.
Right, it's for the action, and the action is going to be what's mechayev him, and that's the moment. The moment of the kinyan is the moment of the chiyuv misa, right, for being with his mother. So that's going to be a Kollel b'Ramim, and still it counts as esnan. So we see that actually it is an obligation, and when he pays it, it actually is payment. So he says, so that tells us that really there should be a chiyuv. And then he wants to take it one step further and say, and therefore there should also be the halacha of if tafas, if that works. Anytime there's a Kollel b'Ramim, if you take it, you should be able to keep it. So he brings a marshal that makes a distinction, and this is really in where he proves from our Gemara. It's a long tzos. It's a very fascinating tzos. He brings a raya to the marshal. That the concept of Kollel b'Ramim has two levels. When there's actually a based in doing a more severe punishment, then you're putter from everything else. Actually putter. If, however, based in is not doing the more severe punishment, whether it's because it was no edim, no hasra, or it was b'shoigeg, then actually you chayav the other thing. He brings proofs from a Tosfos. He says it doesn't make sense. He says ein zu ela divrei nevius. He says it doesn't make sense because it's from the same concept in the Torah of risha achas atam mechayvei. The basis is in the same pasuk in the Torah. The Torah says based in can only be mechayv you one obligation. So it's either that obligation negates the other, or we're going to say that no, you're really are chayiv. The second basin is just not going to go after you for it. Well, if that's the case, then it should be true in both cases. But nevertheless, he says that is true. Kollel b'Ramim means that there's still an obligation in regards to when based in is not going to give you the more severe punishment, and therefore he says makes sense in our Gemara.
You have to do because otherwise you'd be saying that essentially this person gets one misa, but he's not really getting a kapara. Right? So the misa is not a kapara on him. Right? If you're going to say the obligation is there, right, the person can't do it.
So he has to take care of it.
He can't. How's he going to take care of it?
Before Basin kills him, he has to pay up.
No, but let's say he's chayiv two misas, right? So you give him one misa.
No.
You didn't Kollel b'Ramim two misas.
Yeah, but by two misas could be that shehe misasi kaparasi.
But not if he's chayiv two.
No, but by money, by other things, he's chayiv.
Let's just misa amount, right? So we don't give him misa amount, right? So if you're saying that he's
misasi kaparasi.
Why? If he has his kid, then how's he going with that as kapara?
That is his kapara.
How?
Saying
it has to be. It can't be that the Torah would create a situation where he's going to get misa and he's not going to get his kapara.
Okay, you're telling me a svara why that would be, but it still doesn't tell me why then it doesn't carry over to here. But then it should carry over. The same thing should apply even b'shogeg, because it's the same halacha.
No, because there is not getting the
I understand, but it's the same halacha. If Kollel b'Ramim the way the Torah established it, you tell me why the Torah had to establish it that way.
I'm saying why it has to be one way. Okay.
Right, I'm saying so why? So what? But the proof Rashi says clearly the other way when it's a shogeg. By Esnan. Well, I don't know. Show you. Rashi says that there is such a thing. And he proves in our Gemara that it's going to be this way by at least by a shayik. He brings another place where a tesis, but in our Gemara, that's the explanation in our Gemara. Since he's obligated at least medine shamayim, he owes the money to Kachim. He has to pay the 125%. So that doesn't pater him from the asham. What did we say? He's going to be exempt from the asham. Why is he exempt from the asham? Because he doesn't owe the money. If he doesn't owe the money, an asham always has to be with Keren and Chaimish. You have to give the tashlumin for the damage that you did to the kachim. But you're not paying the damage. He says you are. You're obligated in it. Basin's not going to come and tell you have to give this korban. But he's obligated in the korban and he's obligated in the money as well. And that's he explains and proves from our Gemara that there is a monetary obligation even by a kovelin b'derabbanan. All right, I didn't get to the other two things I want to do in Amud Aleph. I want to jump to Amud Beis, very interesting sugya, and it has a lot of practical halachas. Practical, not so practical, but practical. So the Gemara says, the Gemara asks a question whether Bir Rishona can cause someone to become pregnant or not. The Gemara says that it wants to bring a raya from Tamar. Tamar was a Bir Rishona, and yet she became pregnant. The Gemara says that she basically miacha ba'atzma, she removed her hymen beforehand, and that made it so that she could become pregnant. And the Gemara says that actually in Beis Rebbe, all of the women would do this miacha ba'atzman, so they would remove their hymen beforehand, and they were called tamar. Why they did so? So the different reasons given in the Mefarshim why they would have done this in Rebbe's household. But either way, they named them tamar.
Not
So-
literally a nickname.
But meaning that this was called Tamar's Act. Yeah, what people would
It's
do.
called the Tummer if you did it.
Whether you were called a Tamar
Not
or
literally every woman in his house at the same time.
no, this was what they were titled for doing that. This becomes a halachic question: is there a permission, and B, is there a reason for a woman prior to getting married to remove the hymen? There are those that object halachically, saying it's never been done, it's not a good thing. Why should you do it? The reason to do it, some people do it is in order to avoid the tumah that comes after marriage immediately. What? There's a nidus that we have from the Basulim, so this way you avoid that. Some say that's not a good thing to avoid, whatever it is. But you see that this is not a new concept. The basis for it, those that say that this is not a bad idea, they're coming from this Gemara. The Gemara asks, what do you mean that Tamar was miacha ba'atzma? The Gemara says she became pregnant after being a widow twice, right? V'ahava erva einan. The Gemara says erva einan never actually broke her hymen. They never actually even penetrated, and typically, normally. So they went in from behind. So the Gemara asks from a braiso that Rabbi Eliezer holds that for the 12 months that a woman is nursing, where if she became pregnant again, she could end up not nursing her child. What? What did I say? For the 24 months that a woman nurses, and if she became pregnant and could endanger the child who needs the nourishment, right? In the absence of formula, or even with formula, it's definitely healthier to have breast milk. So so in order not to become pregnant, which we've seen earlier in the Gemara already, the Gemara said that Mashash is b'moich. This is something that you can actively work to not become pregnant. Where Eliezer says, Dashmi b'fnim v'zarmi b'chutz. So even if one would do a normal ma'isa bia, a normal act of penetrating and going in, but the ejaculation, the release would be outside. So this way, there's no danger of pregnancy, and that would be mutter, Rabbi Eliezer says. These are like the acts of Maisa Erva'ina, which would be prohibited. And the Torah says that it was so severe that they died on account of that. So now, it was like Mera'ina and not Erva'ina, like Erva'ina that intentionally not impregnating her, and not like Erva'ina that it is, they did it from not even going in regular, they went from behind, and this is, and this is regular, but releasing outside. What? Rashi quotes Rabbi Eliezer.
No, but I'm saying, but that wasn't what he did. Rashi and Chumash by Ervo Einan says it was Dashmi.
That's a simple reading of Shichei Zarza.
He should have said it was Dashmi.
If he held like the Shita, right? That's not the simplest reading of the Gemara, of the Pasuk. Rashi in the Chumash is always telling you the simplest medrash, the simplest chazal that fits in the Pasuk. And this doesn't really fit in the Pasuk.
No, I thought both of them. I thought the Gemara is that Aaron and both.
No, it can't be, because then she wouldn't have been a Basula, and she would not have been the first Bia.
Both Shalok and Darka, and they were Dashmi and Zerga.
If the
You still have to read the Pasuk on the Pasuk, that they were over on the Shichas Arza.
Shichas Arza, okay, that's Tosfos.
They still were also Dashmi and Zerga. So both are true. So Rashi and Chumash not meaning.
So he's
you do both, right?
Well.
Either one will accomplish the lack of pregnancy.
So here we get into Tosfos. Tosfos has a question. Yeah, what? Tosfos. This gets into Tosfos of is Bia Shalei Kedarka considered the act of Ervaina? And Tosfos says Ervainan was, and the reason, the basis for Tosfos' question is because the Gemara seems to say that Bia Shalei Kedarka is permissible for a Jew, because the Gemara says, is there something that is prohibited to a guy and permitted to that's b'misa to a guy and permissible to a yid? And it's talking about Bia Shalei Kedarka. So you see that it's permissible. So Tosfos has two roots. One, that yes, penetrating that way, but not actually releasing that way, or as long as it's not done on a regular basis. Two sources and Tosfos. There are two ways of learning what Erva Einan did. Either that it was called Shiches Arza because they penetrated from behind. That is Shiches Arza, a destruction towards the ground, because it has nowhere to go, it'll just come out. So that's a Shiches Arza. That's one way of understanding, and that would be the simpler way of understanding the Gemara, at least. Not that he did both, because in fact, if it was a Shiches Arza, then it would not be Bia Shalei Kedarka. Tosfos says that's what's permissible. Tosfos says that's what's permissible if you're not going to actually release in a Bia Shalei Kedarka. So the simpler reading is like the Gemara first said.
I thought for Tosfos said that part of everyone they're doing it like always. Meaning in Tosfos it's what they're.
Right, they were doing it always. Meaning, how did that?
Even
but they didn't release outside.
Maybe they did.
That has nothing. Then it doesn't make a difference if they did. That's permissible. Then the Bia Shalei Kedarka is not a part of it. That's just.
No, Tosfos says that Bia Shalei Kedarka would be
mutter if you don't release in there.
Or if you do it all. I mean, one way.
Either way, if you don't really, you're explaining the Gemara that Erva Einan did not release in there.
Okay.
they were shiches arza.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, that's permissible in any case. That's not a problem. That would not be ma'aseh erva. That wouldn't be the act of erva. So you'd have to say the act of erva of shiches arza is that they released inside, but that it's considered shiches arza. Otherwise, that's permissible. And then the Gemara wouldn't have any reason to even mention that erva did this, because that's not an issue. Anyway, but this becomes a very irrelevant halacha in regards to a lot of fertility questions, IVF, because the question is how to understand why Tosfos says that this is a mutter act, and what is the isser of what erva einin did. Is the reason because they're not doing a typical intercourse, they're not doing a normal relations. And if that's the case, anytime that you do normal, then it's permissible. And that's why previously we had mishamshim b'moich with a what's called a diaphragm, something inside to block it, will be permissible because you're just doing the normal act. What happens afterwards is not, it happens afterwards. If you learn, however, that that's not the case, the reason is because they intentionally didn't want to impregnate. So anytime you're doing something towards becoming pregnant, actually would be permissible. So
Even if it doesn't involve.
that's right. So the question is, for IVF or for testing for fertility, does it have to be collected in a way that is through typical intercourse, and then you collect it and bring it in? Or can it be done even outside? Because it's being collected for the purpose of perivirivia. The whole prohibition of hoitzi zera is levatala. But if it's for a tachlis of the purpose of perivirivia, then it will be permissible. And this is a big discussion in the poskim: is the normal act, or is it, or not? Ramosha deals with this a lot. Ramosha would prefer, what was that? Yeah. So I'll start with the Achiezer, because Ramosha brings the Achiezer, disagrees with it. Well, the Achiezer holds that a condom would be considered a normal derech tashmish, because you're doing the normal act. And so that would be permissible, and that's the best way to collect. Ramosha says it's not logical to say that that's a normal act when you're not even in contact with the wife. That's as much outside as inside. So Ramosha would rather dashma b'fnim v'zara b'chutz in such ways. And there are many. I'm saying Achiezer and Ramosha, but it's way before. Ramosha is also very practical about it. He says you have to know what would work for the best collection and actually work as a collection. If you can't test well in one way, so then it doesn't make a difference if that's halachically the best way. You can't get the result. And the same would be if it's not practical to do it. Ramosha says the idea of being in a doctor's office and having relations there is the worst of all of these, because it's a pirza gedola to go into a room and everybody's like waiting for you to come out. It's just not an appropriate way to do it. So Ramosha holds that you just have to get the best way to collect it, and even for testing, even for different forms of testing. And we'll see later the Gemara in Aral, the Gemara talks about somebody that's a krushavcha, a potential that they have a hole in the urethra essentially, and therefore can't produce. And the question is whether you can test them. And the Gemara asks how to test them. So you see from the fact the Gemara asks how to test them, you see that this is tests of mutter, and there's a question of how to make the tests. Some say fakir. No, it shows that you're not allowed to test. And the Gemara is asking how you're going to be able to test. Which way is going to be a permissible type of test? Al Kapanim, this becomes a very relevant part of this. What we're learning from this Gemara, that really the Maisa of Erva Inin or the Hotzar Zera Levatala is any time that it's actually made with the intent of not having, or specifically not wanting to relate to the woman in a normal way. But if there's relating to the woman in a normal way, that would be permissible. And that would explain a little bit Taisus, why Taisus is more lenient or so lenient on Bia Shalei Kedarka, because as long as you're interacting with the woman in a normal way, if that is a type of normal way, that would be permissible. Of course, the Shulchan Aruch paskins l'chumra and the Ramah paskins l'kula. The Ramah is lenient. The Mechaber is machmir. But the idea is, either way, it has to be that the kavana, that's clear in the Gemara. The kavana has to be l'shem connecting and l'shem being with the wife in a normal way.